By the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we hailed were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Good evening, and wasn't that absolutely beautiful? Thank you so much. My name is Patty Charlton. I'm the Senior Vice President here at the college, and we just want to say a wonderful good evening and welcome on behalf of CSN. CSN is the largest education institution in Nevada, and we recently received Excellence in Education's notoriety for being one of the top 25 colleges in the nation awarding associate's degree to Hispanics in STEM fields. CSN is also the only Hispanic serving institution in the state of Nevada, and we work with our Division of Workforce and Economic Development to provide a vibrant workforce for our community. We are so pleased and so very excited to present this evening's LIBRE Forum at CSN, and would like to thank Daniel Garza for having this event here at CSN. And as an education of higher institution, we are so thankful for all that Governor Bush has done as he was a governor in the state of Florida, for his A+ plan for education reform while he was in Florida and becoming a national model and setting the tone for the nation. Bush's plan focused on setting high goals for students, holding schools accountable for poor performance, and rewarding success, and for expanding student choice for parents and students. So thank you so much for being here at CSN, and we hope that this is the first of many, many opportunities for you to visit our campus. I'd like to introduce Juan Martinez of the LIBRE Forum, and thank you so much for being here.
Good evening. How you guys doing? My name is Juan Martinez. As she said, I'm the field director here with the LIBRE Initiative. I wanted to invite everyone outside to come outside and check us out, learn how to get more involved. We're constantly trying to look for new ways to get involved and engage in the Hispanic community and all communities, really. I wanted to thank the College of Southern Nevada for hosting us here tonight. If we could get a round of applause, I really appreciate the hospitality they gave us. I would also like to thank Governor Bush for coming out. He has a busy schedule, and we're really grateful that he came out today, too. One last thing, I would like to ask everyone, if you're going to tweet or Facebook this, please use a hashtag LIBRE Forum. With that said, I'd like to introduce our Executive Director, Daniel Garza. Daniel Garza is a real champion in the Hispanic community. He worked his way from the fields to staffer at the White House. So with that said, I'd like to introduce Daniel Garza.
Thank you, Juan. I also want to express thank you to Patty Charlton and the folks here at College of Southern Nevada. You guys have been wonderful hosts to accommodate us. This is our third LIBRE Forum, and we're thrilled and honored to be able to present it to you and offer it as a platform to assure that the Latino community is engaged in having a conversation with influential leaders across America who are deciding policy. It used to be in America that a promise made was a promise kept. Today, Americans are fed up with elected officials who have failed to deliver on their repeated promises to return control back to the American people and away from Washington. Yet, only those in Washington and those connected to Washington seem to be flourishing nowadays, while the rest of us are scraping our knees with a persistently stagnant economy. It is working Americans who have had to make sacrifices to pay for the runaway spending in Washington. And in the face of failed big government policies, our friends on the left make demands on Washington politicians, knowing full well the policies they are promoting serve only to make Washington even bigger and even more powerful. And the Latino liberal groups who presume to represent all Latinos blindly follow along, demanding more and more programs for more and more people, as they feign indignity at concerned voices who legitimately ask, how do we pay for all these entitlement programs when our national debt is already perilously so high? Obamacare has only served to shift the cost from insurers over to overburdened taxpayers and the consumer. It has also limited doctor and clinic choice, raised premiums, and instituted sky-high deductibles, causing too many to put off health care. The unemployment rates for Black and Hispanic youth are in the double digits, yet liberals would double the cost to hire them by demanding sky-high spike in the minimum wage. On issue after issue, there seems to be no regard to fiscal responsibility or responsible governance. At an increasingly accelerated pace, we are ceding more and more power to politicians. Washington taxes more, spends more, borrows more, and more elected officials keep failing to deliver on their promises. The danger is, power is being more and more centralized in Washington. And as a result, we, the American people, have become less powerful and less control of our own lives. America is in danger of no longer sustaining that proposition that Abraham Lincoln spoke of on that hallowed ground in Pennsylvania, that our nation would remain a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Elected officials time and again have eroded our individual rights enshrined in our founding charters, usurped the role of the market, and placed our fiscal sustainability in peril. And many in Washington, cronies, interest groups, and feckless politicians do not seek your support for these programs. They seek your submission. And by demonizing and attacking your very character, if you express concern at the irresponsibility ruining our nation's fiscal state. If you're like us, this only doubles your resolve to defend our free market legacy, preserve the principles of our founding charters, and support those who have courageously proven they will deliver on their promise. Our intent today is to inform and educate Latinos on the policy positions of influential leaders across America who decide the direction of our nation, especially those who are working hard to remove barriers to opportunity and are focused on growing the private sector. We can no longer stand idly by and allow others who do not represent our views and our interests to control the conversation. Today, I am honored to introduce a free market champion. He is one of those rare elected officials who delivered on the promises he made to empower individuals, assist the truly needy, and remove barriers to opportunity. Born in Texas, Governor Bush showed an interest in public service at an early age, choosing to go to Mexico to teach English while on the exchange program in high school. He went on to earn a bachelor's degree in Latin American affairs from the University of Texas at Austin. Governor Bush moved to Florida, where he became particularly interested in education reform. And under his leadership in the late 1990s, the Foundation for Florida's Future joined forces with the Greater Miami Urban League to establish the state's first charter school, Liberty City Charter School, in one of the most underserved parts of Miami-Dade County. Elected to serve as the governor of Florida from 1998 to 2007, Jeb Bush brought about many policy successes during his tenure and was particularly well known for championing major education reform. During his two terms, Florida raised academic standards, required accountability in public schools, and created the most ambitious school choice program in the nation. And thanks in large part to these reforms, Florida stands as a shining example of success, with Hispanic and minority students closing the achievement gap at an incredible pace. In fact, since 2003, fourth grade reading scores for Florida's Hispanic students have risen twice as fast for Hispanics nationally. We value the fact that Governor Bush speaks fluent Spanish and has a strong record of working with local leaders to better understand the issues facing the Latino community. And we appreciate the opportunity he has provided for us to hear more from him today about the top issues facing our community. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Governor Jeb Bush.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. Thank you all. Gracias a todos ustedes. Thank you all very much. Gracias a todos. Estoy honrado de estar aquí de nuevo en Nevada. Cuando Daniel habló un poco de mi experiencia, dijo que gradué de la Universidad de Texas in Latin American Affairs. I had a Latin American affair. It was with my wife, Columba, and it's been an affair for 42 years, and it has warmed my life, it has organized my life. In fact, if I had a magic wand to be able to give anything that could give life purpose and meaning, it would be to have every relationship as blessed as mine, with my wife Columba, and now our 3 kids, and our 2 beautiful in-laws, and our 4 grandchildren. I'm truly blessed, and my life changed when I went to León, Guanajuato, Mexico, where I met my wife Columba, and it's been a blessing from there on out. I thought I would give you, I won't give you the standard stump speech. I'm going to give you 3 stories, if you will. And then we can open it up for questions, and we'll have a dialogue. The first story is a story in 1998 when I ran for governor the second time. The first time I lost. I was one of the few Republicans to lose in 1994. And sometimes you get disappointed when you lose, but it gave me a chance to reevaluate my life, how I was going about my business, and it made me a better candidate in 1998. I pledged to myself that in 1998 I would wander around. I would listen and learn first, which I think is what's missing in leadership today. So I was in a town hall meeting, similar size as this, and a lady raised her hand, who's now a friend of mine. Her name was Berthe Aponte de la Rosa, a Colombian American. And she was very angry at me without ever meeting me. She just assumed that conservatives didn't care about people like her. Her case was that she had a severely disabled child, a precious 14-year-old, as I recall, about that age at that time, who had autism, had severe developmental disabilities, great challenges, but the way Berthe viewed it was she was a gift from God. That everybody has value in society, and her child, which she loved with her heart and soul along with her husband Milton, she wanted to make sure that she outlived that child. Imagine that. Think about what it would be like, and maybe people in this room have a similar experience. Think about what it would be like to worry each and every day whether you're going to outlive your child that you love and that you take care of. She was mad at me. I couldn't get her unmad in this public setting, so I said, tell you what, teach me. And so I spent 4 days in that next month where I learned about the plight of families like Berthe's and Milton's and Luz. And the net result was I probably have become one of the experts in public life on dealing with people that have severe disabilities. When I got elected governor in 1998 and 1999, the first week I was summoned by a federal judge that was about ready to take over this program. And I said, please, let me go to the legislature. I know a little bit about this now. I actually took the time to listen, and I know that we can create a better program. And the legislature obliged me 3 months later. We funded the programs, we reformed them, and now I think Florida is one of the models for the developmentally disabled. Why does that matter? Why does that matter? Well, 30,000 families thinks it matters. Milton and Berthe Aponte know it matters because they now know that there's going to be the support for them as they get into their retirement years. They know that someone will love Lucy, and the federal government and the state government in partnership will provide for them. Here's my belief as a conservative, a consistent conservative that cut taxes, that cut spending and the things that weren't the most important things. This should be a high priority. Taking care of the most vulnerable in our society should be a core value for this country. Those that have already made it, they don't need a government handout. They don't need to have, a carve-out for their tax deal. We should shift power away from Washington. We should lessen the influence of lobbyists. We should take care of the most vulnerable in our society. The unborn, people that have been abandoned and abused as children, the developmentally disabled, frail elders. They are deserving of the support of government. And then we should make sure that it is community-based, where people can act on their heart to show their love for their fellow man. That's the lesson of listening and learning. And I hope you want a leader that actually takes the time to listen, that doesn't have the arrogance to think that he's got it all figured out without ever actually taking the time to listen to people and grow and learn. Second story. The second story, you like that one? The second story is about a child that I didn't meet until last year. This is a 24-year-old young woman named Denisha Merriweather. Now, Denisha grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. I hate that term. I don't think there should be tracks that decide kind of your life. I think everybody has the right to rise. We all start out in different parts in our life, and as a society, what we need to make sure is that people have the capacity to achieve earned success. That is the American way. And that's being lost little by little in increments not discernible to the naked eye without a big fight. That's changing in our country. So Denisha came to tell me a story, and it was a story of hardship when she was growing up. She was in public schools, and she was held back in third grade, and she was held back again. And people never told her that she was capable of learning. She was being cast aside. She was angry. And her godmother, thankfully, found out about the Corporate Tax Scholarship Program in Florida, the largest voucher program in the country. 80,000 kids, low-income kids, go to private schools indirectly with public dollars. 80,000 children. It took a lot of fighting to win that fight. Promise me. You can see the tire marks still on my forehead, I think, vague. Little bruise I still have here. Because I took on some very powerful interests in our state, the teachers union, the bureaucracies, the adults in a system that were focused on the economic interest of the adults rather than whether children learned or not. That was Florida before I got to be governor of the state of Florida. And Denisha told me the story that when she got to go to this Christian school, a private school, a miracle happened. The teachers started saying, "You're capable. You're smart. We love you. You're an asset. You have capacity to rise. You're capable of doing anything you want to do." And she overcame those 2 years of being held back. And she was the first in her family to graduate from high school and the first in her immediate family to graduate from college. There are thousands and thousands of people in Florida that have that same story. 250,000 kids are grade level readers now because we raised expectations. We took on the powerful interests and we won. And the greatest learning gains have happened amongst Latino kids. Florida's Latino kids, fourth grade reading on the nation's report card are 2 grade levels ahead of their counterparts around the country. I'm not kidding. Don't let anybody tell you that children can't learn. A society that is just, that is humble, a right to rise society makes sure that we challenge every basic assumption so that children can learn. That's not a federal government program, but a leader of this country better make sure that they're a partner in disrupting the order so that more and more children can grow up. Your precinct, your zip code, the level of income of your family should not create the destiny of your life. This country will never be the most prosperous economic superpower that I believe we have the capacity to do unless we disrupt the old order. And in Washington, D.C., we need a lot of disruption because the culture there is it's stagnant. It's not as innovative as the people that they're there to serve. And I know how to disrupt things because I did it as governor of the state of Florida, whether it was education or creating a climate where we led the nation in job growth, where we were one of 2 states to be AAA bond rated, where they called me Vito Corleone because we vetoed projects after projects that didn't go through the proper order, where we challenged everything and we grew and prospered. The final story is a story of business people that I've just met in Denver, Colorado. A Hispanic family that had grown their business, and they were worried whether they were going to make it because of Obamacare because of new rules, workforce rules, because of the confusion and uncertainty of regulation, their success was now being imperiled. It wasn't that they weren't working hard, they were working harder than ever. It wasn't that they didn't love their business or their customers or the employees that worked with them. It was the complications of this administration that wasn't making things better. Irrespective of what the intentions were, they were making things worse. And if you look at the range of regulation that exists now in Washington, D.C., whether it's the waters of the United States that now allows the Army Corps or the EPA to have significant says in the water policies of states like Nevada and Florida, or the EPA rules that are going to create higher costs for low-income Americans and people in the middle class by rising utility bills without dealing with what they were tending to do, which is to lower the carbon footprint of our country. By the way, our carbon footprint has been reduced in 10 years by 10%, not because of anything government does, but because of the revolution of hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling created an explosion of less carbon intensive energy at a lower source to allow us to create jobs in our own economy. We need to reverse the trend of thinking that government, through rules and taxes and mandates, creates prosperity. Prosperity is created when people pursue their dreams with a vengeance, where they, through trial and error, apply whatever skills they have to achieve their desired results. And the interaction of all of us together in a free society creates more prosperity than any government program ever created. I believe we could grow our economy at 4% per year, not this new normal of 2%. 6 million more people are stuck in poverty than the day that Barack Obama got elected president. The middle class have had a $2,300 decrease in their disposable income since the day that Barack Obama got elected president. This has not worked. If we want to restore America's greatness, we need to make sure that people that are striving for success have a chance to achieve it. And I believe I have the skills to make it happen. High sustained economic growth and a strong America where our leadership is respected around the world is my mission. And I hope to be able to earn your support here in Nevada and across the country. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor. Magnifico. So we are nonpartisan.
I'm not.
He's not, but we are, the LIBRE Initiative. And so we want to focus, of course, on ideas. We do endorse ideas, and
Right.
that's the discussion we want to have today with the governor. And so, Governor, thank you so much for being with us today. You recently unveiled your alternative to Obamacare, which focuses on, your plan focuses more on giving more control to states, increasing flexibility to design benefits, and using the federal tax code to make changes to healthcare. So Latinos care about healthcare, and I would like to just simply ask, would it lower healthcare costs while improving access to healthcare, which Obamacare has not done?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you created a system that was more consumer-directed, where people had information, where they were engaged in their healthcare decisions, they could pick the doctor and the clinic and the hospital that they choose, that they had a variety of different options, that the basic plan, the basic option provided by states, not the federal government anymore, was a low premium, higher deductible, catastrophic coverage. That's the role, I think, the proper role for government is to make sure that people have the catastrophic coverage to assure that there's not a high impact event that changes their life and their family's life. And then you have the ways for small businesses and larger businesses and the government, depending on income, to provide support for the co-pays and the out-of-pocket costs. That is the proper way of doing this. And you could lower costs and improve quality. The second thing we need to do is to tear down the barriers of innovation. I mean, there are so many tools now making it possible for people to engage in their own health care by knowing that they're eating right, knowing when there's an acute outbreak of something, by just having devices on our body to be able to wirelessly send messages out to our caregivers and to our healthcare providers. There's so much that we could do, but the barriers now of innovation have been stifled by the FDA, and I think we need to tear them down so that people are more engaged consumers. The final thing I'd say is Washington has too much power. And why this matters is that the single biggest reason why we haven't seen rising income in this recovery is rising healthcare costs. And that relates to nothing related to the exchanges themselves. It's the impact Obamacare has on the broad number of people that are getting their care through their companies. With all these mandates, you have higher costs, and businesses now are pushing more and more of those costs through higher premiums and higher co-pays on the employees. And that has to be reversed. If you want to create rising income and greater jobs, then eliminate these employer-employee mandates. There are 6.5 million people working part-time right now. And a lot of them are working part-time because Obamacare does not kick in for people that are working less than 30 hours. So trusting people to interact in their own communities in a way will create, I think, lower costs, economic prosperity, and better health.
Terrific. Entre paréntesis, permíteme decirle, esta pregunta en español. I want to ask a question. The only question
Pide
I'll
permiso
ask
a los que hablan inglés.
I want to ask the only question I'll ask in Spanish, and it has to do with immigration, and then I'll ask it in English as well, for our English-speaking audience. So la pregunta es, actualmente los dos partidos están puestos en una posición fija sobre lo que es la reforma de inmigración. Por un lado, unos piden legalización, una visa para trabajar, que les da la certidumbre de que no van a ser deportados. Por el otro lado, piden un paso a la ciudadanía. Entonces, ¿cómo reconciliar esas diferencias y qué piensa usted sería la mejor reforma para ser un justo remedio para esto?
Mira, hay algunos en nuestro partido, en mi partido, que no están ni para legalización.
Ni uno para el otro.
Quieren dejarlos la gente en las sombras y yo rechazo eso totalmente. Yo creo que tenemos que tener un proceso de legalización donde las personas salen de la sombra, reciben un permiso de trabajo, una tarjeta que reconoce que está aquí provisionalmente, que no se comete crimen, que paga impuestos, que aprende inglés y que trabaja, que no recibe asistencia del gobierno federal y que trabaje. Y por un proceso gana el privilegio de ser permanentemente legal aquí. Eso creo que es donde hay el compromiso entre las ideas diversas que existen. Pero tenemos que hacerlo ya, ¿no?
Por
Esto
supuesto.
de años y años.
Por supuesto.
Ridículo. Esto es de beneficio para todos, de crear un ambiente, como acabo de describirlo, donde hay permanencia, donde hay certidumbre, para que la gente pueda conseguir sus vidas sin tener la angustia de que su primo tiene problemas o algo. Eso ya, tenemos que cambiarlo.
Y es bueno para nuestra economía.
Es súper bueno para la economía. Y a la misma vez hay que controlar la frontera. ¿Alguien piensa aquí que controlar la frontera no es importante? Sube su... No, ¿alguien tiene una opinión en contrario de eso? You do? Open border? Bueno, es un 1% del grupo, porque la gran mayoría de las personas creen que hay que respetar la ley y hay que respetar las personas que están aquí legal, que tienen derecho a estar aquí. Ellos sí tienen derechos y valores, pero los que quieren venir cuando quieren y no ir por el proceso hacen daño a los que están pacientemente esperando la llegada, ¿no?
Gracias, gobernador. Quiero preguntarle ahora en inglés. So I want to ask you now in English the same question. You have said that immigration is an act of love because folks come to America to improve the lives of their loved ones.
Yeah.
Some have asserted that a work visa bill would satisfy market forces and labor demand, while others argue a path to citizenship is the only acceptable reform. What steps can we take to ensure that immigration reform is fair to both current and potential future citizens of the United States?
So we need to control the border. We need to make legal immigration easier than illegal immigration. There needs to be a path to legalized status where people come out from the shadows, where they pay a fine, where they pay taxes, where they work, where they don't commit crimes. This is not a big, huge requirement for people because that's exactly what they do. But they're coming out from the shadows so that they're treated with dignity and respect, and over an extended period of time, they earn legal status. That, to me, is the position that I think can garner the necessary support to move on then from controlling the border and dealing with this to also turning our immigration system into an economic driver. We need a guest worker program so that people can move back and forth based on economic need. We need, I think, to deal with the shortages in skilled labor. Where there isn't the qualified workers, we should provide training. This is a school that does that each and every day. I know they do. We should make sure that we provide support for everybody. But in a growing economy, there's opportunities as well to create a legal system that is part of our economic prosperity and growth. In Spanish, you didn't ask me quite that question.
No.
But it was close enough.
Well, let me add also in English. Do you see the Democrats as partners in gaining consensus or as enemies?
I think there are enough Democrats that want to get this resolved with a new president. This president, I think, had the chance. Look, he had 60 votes right in the Senate, and he had a majority in the House for his first 2 years. He promised to do it. He garnered significant support amongst Latinos in his first race. And crickets, I mean, like nothing happened. And I think you have to think that maybe there was a political motivation to keep this as a wedge issue. Well, I think it's run out of gas. I think people now want to get this resolved. And if I'm president, I will work to resolve this in a way that respects the immigrant experience, respects the rule of law, creates a climate where we're serious about enforcing the border, but allows people a path to legal status. The other thing that might distinguish me from others in our party is I think that kids who've come here with their parents through no fault of their own, they should receive a different, a more accelerated status. I think DREAM Act kids ought to be given the chance to earn citizenship, particularly if they serve in the military, graduate from high school, because they can make a contribution as well.
I'll join in that one. The Libre Institute, our sister organization, released a study last week on the experience of the Hispanic worker during the last decade, which found that the poor economy and sluggish recovery has affected Latinos more drastically than non-Hispanics. Specifically, Hispanics in the U.S. have experienced lower wages, higher unemployment rates, and reduced opportunities of maintaining full-time employment. What needs to be done to generate real sustainable economic growth?
I mean, this is the tragedy of this tepid growth that we're living in. I mean, you've all heard the term new normal. This is a term that now in the postmodern world we're just all have to accept 2% growth. I don't. I hope you don't either. 2% growth is not normal. No. 2% growth traps people in poverty. There's 6 million more people living in poverty than the day that Barack Obama got elected, and disposable income is down. Growth matters. Growth, without economic growth, you're not going to get the first rung on the ladder. So who are the people that are held back when we're not growing? It's younger people. Younger people, which is disproportionately Latinos, right?
That's right.
It's people that are trying to gain skills to be able to get the first rung of the ladder. It's people that haven't been in the workforce that are trying to get into the workforce. Those are the people that lose with the tepid growth. It's people that are working part-time. It's people that are stuck in poverty. If we're serious about creating a right to rise society, then high growth has to be part of this. Look, if you're rich, you're richer under Barack Obama. This is the irony of all ironies, is the left talks about this as like somehow it's unfair, but the wealthy, because they've already achieved their wealth with this monetary policy we have had increases in their prosperity that is unprecedented. And if you're poor, you receive financial benefits, but we're creating intergenerational poverty where people are stuck. And if you're in the middle, you're getting squeezed. And that is the great challenge for our country, is how do you forge consensus again about the big things that would allow rising income to become the norm. I mean, being around a kitchen table today, the good news is your energy prices are down. That's good. You go to the gas pump and you're paying less. Your power, your utility bills are down. The bad news is you're likely to have flat or declining wages, and out of those wages, you're having to pay higher costs because of health care. You're falling behind. And we need to reform these things so that we can actually create more and more income for people to feel ambitious about their future rather than cautious about it. And people are losing their ambitions to strive for success. And I just think it's wrong. This country doesn't work when we are overly dependent upon a overly aggressive government.
In the past, you have mentioned the idea of implementing a federal school choice program in which families living below or near the poverty line could use their federal education funding at any public school they desire, which you talked about the zip code. Up until now, school choice programs have only been implemented at the state level. What role should the federal government play in school choice?
Well, there are a couple of ways you could do this. One way would be, let's take Nevada. Nevada has an incredibly ambitious program called the Education Savings Account. where parents, it is one of a kind in the country. It is very provocative, it's bold, it's the kind of reform that you seldom see anymore. God forbid if you actually did something bold that got someone upset at you. You know, we're all like in this world of tepidness because of that. The ESA, if it's being implemented now, imagine if a federal government partner said, for Title I money, which is the money that goes to low-income schools that have a disproportionate high number of kids that are qualified for free and reduced lunch. Imagine if you said, if you want to take that money and enhance your ESA program, you have the right to do it. Or in Florida, we have a voucher program for kids with learning disabilities. If a parent has, by federal law, a parent has it's called an individual education plan, IEP. That's the bureaucratic term. And if your child is not meeting that plan, in Florida, you can take the state and local dollars and go to a private school without question, without debate. The bureaucracy can't fight you, it's done.
That's great.
But imagine taking the federal monies that go to the school districts to match that voucher. Or early childhood education. In Florida, we've expanded the number of kids, 4-year-olds, going to literacy-based programs. The federal monies don't follow that. Why wouldn't that be part of it? So what I'm suggesting is the federal government enhance the programs that are being established by courageous governors and legislatures and implemented at the local level, because I know they will achieve rising student achievement. Here's an interesting statistic, and some on the left just can't grasp this, but here's the deal. Kids with learning disabilities in Florida lead the nation in terms of learning gains, and it's measured on the nation's report card. You can't teach to that test. It's not gamed. It's a viable data point. Number 1 in the country. And why? Because in our accountability system, kids with learning disabilities count. They count. Their learning gains are actually part of the grading of schools. And parents, if they're not satisfied, can send their kids to a private school. That makes every school better. And that's what we need. We need rising student achievement where the whole focus is on learning, irrespective of where you start, irrespective if you have some form of learning disability. That should not be the deterrent. Florida's proving that kids, low-income kids, Latino kids, African-American kids, kids with learning disabilities are leading the nation in the top 4 or 5 in every category because we've changed our system and created greater accountability.
Amazing what can happen when you remove barriers.
Yeah.
So, we all know about the crisis in the Hispanic dropout problem, but if one is able to surpass that and get over that and go off to college, a lot of millennials, and especially I think a lot of students here, are suffering or buckling under the weight of college debt with tuition. Some of them are being overwhelmed or are overwhelmed once they graduate. How did we get here and how do we reverse that trend?
Well, one of the little treats in Obamacare was the nationalization of the student loan program, taken over by the federal government, with very little counseling, very little accountability, very little underwriting. Loan growth has grown exponentially. And students haven't been given the counseling to understand how they can get a degree at the pace they can get it in a lot of schools, and graduation rates haven't gained. We measure 4-year degree completion in the United States by the percentage of kids that graduate, full-time students graduating with a 4-year degree in 6 years. Well, I mean, should we call it a 6-year degree and be honest? Or should maybe we focus on garnering a 4-year degree in 4 years? There should be reform of higher education along with the student loan program. Florida has the lowest tuition for in-state students. Our community college system is probably the largest, if not, it's close to the largest, and it is incredibly community-based and focused on the degrees, the AS degrees, and 4-year degrees now that students need to be able to start working. We need to be much more reality-based in our higher education system and not push debt on the backs of kids without the reform for higher education. The objective ought to be getting a degree in 4 years getting a 4-year degree in 4 years and making sure that degree is relevant to being able to get a job. And we also ought to encourage people to get a career-oriented certificate or an AS degree, because immediately there are huge shortages in the skilled workforce side of our economy that doesn't require a psych major. We got a lot of psych majors, but we don't have enough electricians and nurses and information technologists and engineers and plumbers, all of which requires skills that could be achieved through the private sector and certainly through universities and colleges like this one here.
And they pay well.
They pay well. So how does Florida have the lowest tuition rate? We have the most accountability, or probably top 3 or 4 accountability for our universities. If you don't have a degree completion percentage as you committed to the Board of Governors, you lose money. And the schools that do have that, they gain that money. And we're increasing the accountability side of this so it's performance-based. And so you have skin in the game. The universities have skin in the game, and they're seeing greater outcomes. We also keep tuition low. And we have the largest prepaid program in the country. All of my grandkids, if they go to Florida schools, will have a prepaid program with a guaranteed rate. You can do this, and I think the federal government needs to get out of the way and allow for states to be able to innovate in this area.
Thank you.
I gotta say something else.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in Las Vegas, and was it last week the debate was taking place?
Yes.
There really is no such thing as a free lunch. I don't know who came up with that term, but it's really true. You can't offer free things if you can't afford them. One of the challenges in our country is that we've accumulated, in these 8 years under this president, we'll have accumulated as much debt as all 43 presidents prior. And just offering this up as more and more government programs is not going to solve the problems. We need to be a lot more creative than that, because the debt that we're putting on the burdens for the next generation will overwhelm their capacity, irrespective of how educated they are. That burden should not be on the backs of young people, but we're doing it each and every day.
Talk about a program, a burgeoning federal program. The 1996 welfare reform was supposed to require work, or at least
it did.
The recipients were supposed to be preparing for work.
Yes.
But those requirements faded given the tough economic times, and they were able to argue away some of those requirements. Today, there's a growing consensus on both sides of the political aisle that our current welfare system has created the wrong incentives such as idleness and non-work for far too many people. 35% of Americans are currently on welfare, according to one statistic. What would you propose doing to reform the welfare system while making sure the truly needy receive needed assistance?
Absolutely. I mean, look, we need to go back to the basics on this, and we need welfare reform 2.0 that encourages work, that rewards work, that doesn't penalize work. There's elements of welfare reform that we need to expand beyond the 96 law, which, by the way, in some states like Florida, there was a 90% reduction in the number of people on welfare. And you're right, it's not all work, because people could go to community colleges and get a degree, or they could do other things in preparation for work. So I think we need to sharpen that focus, but we also need to look at, so if you're married, and in America today, if a spouse is not working but wants to work or needs to work, right now we have this situation where their income is on top of the income of their spouse, and the marginal tax rate is on top of that. So in other words, you're paying a higher rate even though you're starting out, and you shouldn't be paying taxes at all for the first, whatever it is, $12,000 of income. So allow for single filers would be one way to create a more ambitious way of work. In my proposal, we also deal with the earned income tax credit. Single people ages 20 to 24 cannot apply for earned income tax credit, and that's where there is significant double-digit unemployment. If you gave them an earned income tax credit, it's a much better way than raising the minimum wage to allow for them to enter the workforce and start garnering the skills of work that would allow them to rise up. And so making sure marriage is part of this process, that you can't, the idea that you have to be a single mom to be able to receive part of the welfare benefits, I think, is inappropriate. A total revamp of this with a focus of lifting people out of poverty should be the objective, and work is at the core of this. You have to have a society where more and more people have a chance to work. And at 2% growth, the reason why you hit it right on the head, workforce participation rates today are lower than they were in 1977. Yeah. We've redefined who we are without a big debate. This country has always been a country where hard work has been rewarded, and now there are detriments for that to happen. We're putting lids on people's aspirations, particularly low and moderate income people.
How responsible is government in that low participation labor rate?
Well, there's a lot of reasons that people work part-time. If Obamacare only kicks in when you're making, 31 hours, naturally businesses will lower it to 30. So you're going from 40 hours to below whatever the threshold is. There's all sorts of unintended consequences. The best of intentions, raising the minimum wage will create fewer jobs. It has been proven over and over again. There's other ways to do this to make sure that the barriers to rise up aren't a ceiling that is a concrete ceiling. We need to tear it down so that we create more people. Here's the deal. If you're born poor in America today, this extraordinary country, you're more likely to stay poor than any time in modern history. And if you're born rich, you're more likely to stay wealthy as well. We need to get back to the more dynamic America where people have a chance to rise, and if they stop making income, they go down. But this permanency of wealth and the permanency of poverty is not how America works.
I want to remind you folks to get your questions in because we'll be going to the audience's questions real quick here. Changing the topic a bit, but not too much. U.S. Hispanics are a young population that care deeply about the future and worry about the growing federal debt and the broken tax code. Over the course of the Obama administration, the federal debt has grown by nearly $8 trillion. Now, to be fair, that's on top of the $10 trillion that was already there when he inherited the office. How can we balance the need to cut taxes with the need to pay down the debt without forcing a government shutdown and keeping the spending caps?
Well, I don't think we should shut down the government. That creates more cost to government actually, and I don't think we should I don't think we should default on the debt. These are times where you can negotiate and create an environment where you can have some reforms that deal with the longer term issues, and I think that's more than fair. But ultimately, the United States should not default on its debt. That is an unserious act that would create real problems for our economy. So what do? I'm going to sound like a broken record. High sustained economic growth is the best way to create revenue for the government. The most exotic forms of taxation don't create the same kind of revenue for government as higher growth. It's check the record. If you're nerdy enough, go look at the federal budget and look at and match it with the economic growth, and you'll see what I'm saying. There's a lag, a leading effect that economic growth creates revenue in the out years, but it certainly does it. So creating a strategy of high growth has to be part of that. Curbing spending where it is the most dramatic. And again, this last week, the federal government's spending was announced. Everybody was celebrating in the White House a $450 billion budget deficit, which was $30 or $40 billion less than the previous year. Those are the marching bands, huge celebration. Well, that's not too hot. And the reason why we had that, even though there was a surge in revenue, like a 4% growth, I believe, in revenue, is that spending went up by 5.8%. And why did spending go up by 5.8%? Because Medicaid grew by double digit because of Obamacare. And Medicare is growing at a far faster rate than anything else. You've got to preserve and protect these programs for those that receive it today, but reform it so it doesn't overwhelm everything else. And the next president's going to have the courage to challenge the orthodoxy of Washington to begin to forge consensus to solve those two big problems that are going to overwhelm every other aspect of the budget.
The repeating arguments commonly used by big labor. Thank you, Carly. Some express skepticism about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, suggesting that American wages, employment, and prosperity could take a hit. On the other hand, supporters of free markets agree that the protectionism actually hurts the economy. One, do you support TPP, and what other steps can policymakers take to make America more competitive in an increasingly global economy?
So I generally support free trade as long as it's fair and that the protections in the agreement are there for American businesses that are unfairly treated. The reason for that is that most countries have higher tariff and non-tariff barriers than we do. And so any trading agreement will create disproportionate benefits for us as long as it's enforced. I haven't read this agreement. In fact, I don't think anybody has yet. It hasn't come. We haven't received it. So, that's my big caveat. I haven't seen the agreement. But particularly in these countries in Asia that have non-tariff barriers that make it hard for entry for any country, If they are lowering their barriers, as has been written about at least, that's a huge win. It's a win for American agriculture, it's a win for American technology, it's a win for American services, and it can be a win for American industrial might. If we fix how we regulate and tax, we can outcompete anybody. But I haven't seen the agreement, and I don't know what the enforcement mechanisms are, but clearly we're living in a global economy. And those that want to create walls, physical walls and walls in general, are not dealing with reality. The simple fact is you're dealing with We're going to create a 25% tariff on cars made by Ford Motor Company, a US-based company that also is expanding its operations, building cars and trucks here in the United States. Who wins on that? Certainly it's not the Ford workers in the United States. It's not. This is a lose-lose. In a free trading society, in a global economy, what we need to do is make sure that we're competitive and make sure that unfair trading practices are vigorously enforced, that we fight hard. If there's cybersecurity issues, stealing espionage, stealing private property, intelligence, information, intellectual property, then we should use the trading mechanisms to fight against that. We should be much more aggressive in using these rules of engagement so that we protect American industry.
As
and
leverage?
I think not just leverage. If people are cheating, then it's not free trade. It's unfair trade. And that's the challenge is you got to create a free trade environment, but then be vigilant to make sure that it's fair for American workers.
So I'll get to the questions from the audience, and the first one from Carlos is, Mr. Bush, I believe illegal immigration is a symptom. What do you think is the real disease, and what would you do to cure it? And as a sort of a follow-up question to that, do you agree with the direction that this administration has taken with our relationship to Latin America?
What relation?
Right.
I mean,
you could speak to that as well.
It's hard to tell that there's much of a. We're not engaged in Latin America. We should be. We should be a counter to China's mercantilist efforts in Latin America. We have major cultural and trading and economic and geopolitical benefits by doing so, and we should be fully engaged. Look, I'm kind of have a special interest in this, I guess, from family, but more equally important. I lived in Venezuela when I was 24 years old for 2 years with my wife and 2 kids. I live in Miami, which is got one foot firmly planted in the United States and one that's kind of in the Caribbean and Latin America. I can see the benefits of a stronger U.S. relationship, one of mutual respect that would create economic opportunities for us, for sure, and certainly create growth for Latin America. If you look at the Northern Triangle countries that are suffering right now because of high crime and the gang problems and the drug problems, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, the majority of people that are coming to this country across our border in Mexico are coming from those countries, not from Mexico. In fact, I think Mexico migration may be at a net draw right now. But we need to create what we did in Colombia when my brother was president. The Proyecto Gran Colombiano was a huge success. It created security. It created economic reforms that Uribe implemented. Colombia's had high sustained economic growth. Poverty has not been eradicated, but it has been limited. And it's much more peaceful because the United States played a partnership role with Colombia. We could do the same, I think, in Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador. It would lessen the people that are being pushed out of the country seeking safety in our own country, and it would lessen the debate on immigration. That's engagement, and we don't seem to have the capability of doing that. The president has recently proposed a version of what I just described, and I think that's good, and we should be creating kind of a much broader consensus about the role of the United States in Latin America.
Regrettably, Venezuela looks like its economy is collapsing. Bolivia is headed that same way. Argentina.
Here's a problem in American foreign policy. If you have an election, then you've checked the box of democracy and you don't, that's it. Well, in the case of Venezuela, it's possible that Chavez got elected with popular vote. There's some some belief that maybe he cheated a bit. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt his first time that he did it right. Then he steals freedom. He obliterates the democratic institutions. He politicizes the judiciary. He and his successor Maduro imprison people that disagree. They've consolidated power in every way, and it is a failed state. It is collapsing. I think the United States should view democracy as most people that study this in a broader way. Democracy is not just elections, it's also respect for the rule of law. It's a respect for private property. It's a respect for the independence of the judiciary. It's respect for people that may not agree with you, that you shouldn't be imprisoned.
Sounds like economic freedom.
It completely sounds like political and economic freedom. That's democracy, that's freedom, that's liberty. And I think our State Department has a mindset that all you got to do is get elected, and then we can't engage anymore, that somehow we're intervening in the affairs of a country. We can stand for the people that want freedom in the world. We can be for that. We have been in the past, and I think we need to again, and Latin America is a good place to start.
As a dad, the most important thing I do is take my daughter to school. Why are so many hesitant to let me have a bigger say in where she goes?
Good schools don't have barriers for parents. I did something, when I was governor, I created a BHAG, it's called, a Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. I read it from a Good to Great, Jim Collins book. It's the only acronym that I actually enjoyed when I was governor. I tried to eradicate acronyms, I totally failed. But this one I thought was important. It was to create big aspirational goals. And our aspirational goal was to have 200,000 mentors in relationships in schools with a focus on struggling readers in third grade. Because if you can't read by the end of third grade, in fourth grade you're reading to learn, you're not learning to read. And you can't, how do you do math if you can't read? How do you do science? How do you do social studies? So this was a huge objective. And what I found was a lot of schools were resistant to having moms and dads and volunteers come into the schools. So I just got a big club out, banged the club down, and took away some of the stupid rules that some of the school districts had to encourage a more open system. I mean, there's got to be some protections in schools, but you should not be prohibited from being actively engaged in your child's education. Technology is a way to do this. But I think it's really important. And by the way, we got to 200,000 kids having mentoring relationships with teenagers and adults. And it was one of the reasons why we had the greatest gains in early literacy reading. I mean, we are lights out. Florida was 29th out of 31 states in the fourth grade NAEP test. And in 10 years' time, big fight, we went to 6th out of 50. And low-income Hispanic kids do better than the California average. I think they do better than the Nevada average as well on that fourth grade test. The notion that somehow kids in poverty can't learn, just blow it up. There should be a 15-yard penalty loss of down. There should be fines, whatever your favorite means by which to shatter that orthodoxy, because it's dangerous to assume that kids can't learn. It is extraordinarily dangerous in the world that we're in. We should assume that God has given every child the talent, that everybody has God-given abilities.
Absolutely.
And we need to maximize those.
Absolutely. Teresa says, what is your opinion on the gender wage gap, and how do you plan on addressing the economic inequality women face?
So if a woman has a like-kind job, a similar job than a man, and is paid 75 cents or 76 cents, which is the common statistics I hear, there are laws that clearly mean that that's discrimination. And they should be enforced. They should be enforced vigorously. No questions asked. That should be the fact. And then we should create high economic growth to make sure that younger women have a chance to rise up as well. I did that when I was governor of Florida. In Florida, women income grew 3 times faster than the national average because we had a growing economy. And so if you're first emerging into the workforce without growth, you're not going to get that first rung. That's just a simple fact. And so as women have entered aggressively into the workforce, they're the last in some cases, and that's why that wage disparity exists. The laws exist, they should be enforced, but we should create a climate where people have a chance to rise up, and women will be the beneficiary of that more than men.
Terrific. I have 2 more questions, but before I ask them, I want to make sure everybody fills out their surveys. There's prizes tied to the surveys that were given
Prizes?
to you. So there's prizes. I forget what they are. What is it, an iPad or something?
iPad. Where's my survey?
We'll make sure you
Speaker
get
was
it.
lousy, but great program.
So let me ask this cute question really quick before I move to the last serious question. Who is your favorite superhero, Marvel they have in parentheses, and why? Do you think the superhero
This is the
what America
second
needs,
time I've
right?
been asked this question. What's up with this?
That people want to know.
Someone told me there's a new Marvel show. It's about Ant-Man or something like that.
You like that one?
No, I haven't met Ant-Man yet.
You're
I don't
more
know.
of a
Look,
DC Comics guy?
I like watching the movies, and I wish I owned Marvel.
Stan Lee.
As someone that believes in capitalism. Yeah. I don't know, I'm kind of old school. I kind of like, I like the old school guys, like Batman. A little dark these days.
Good choice.
I saw that there's a Supergirl is on TV. I saw it when I was working out this morning. There's an ad promoting Supergirl. She looked pretty hot. I don't know what channel it's on, but I'm looking forward to that.
What would you do to...
That'll make news.
What would you do to better the VA healthcare system? I'm trying to move quickly on this one.
Yeah, you want to get me out of my hole I just dug?
What would you do to better the VA healthcare system and the VA benefits overall?
The VA is a disaster. 330,000 employees. Can you imagine that? It is just a monster. It's the largest healthcare system in the world. And yet we have waiting lists for vets that have served their country and are looking for the kind of care that they counted on. And in this kind of monolithic, internal-looking system, you have a tragedy that unfolded in the last year. People were bonused for taking people off waiting lists. The assumption was they would get care by getting off the waiting list. In fact, what happened was they didn't get care and some died. And only 3 people have been fired by this outrageous activity. We need career civil service reform so that not just the VA, but the federal government in general is focused on providing services rather than focusing on their economic interests. There needs to be procurement reform. I was in Colorado recently and was at a VFW lodge with vets, and we talked about this. In Aurora, California, outside of Colorado, outside of Denver, a hospital was being built that was supposed to cost $300 million. Then it went to $800 million. Now it's $1.8 billion. You can't make that up. You got to work really hard to be that incompetent and that corrupt. And so I think the Army Corps ought to take over the construction projects of the VA. Veterans, most importantly, there's 2 things that I think are new for the new veterans that are coming in. You have post-traumatic stress, and I think that the VA needs to build a skill set that is world-class on that to deal with this issue. There needs to be much more community engagement. There are homeless veterans in our country. There should not be a single veteran that is homeless wandering the streets. There are more women's veterans, and women's health issues need to come to the forefront as well. But the thing that I think could be the catalyst for reform of our veteran system is giving veterans more choice. They should have a card that allows them, if they want to go see their private doctor or their private clinic or their private hospital. Some will choose it, some won't. But here's what I know to be true. The minute you empower a consumer, the provider gets better. The minute there's choices, the providers have to innovate. They have to be focused on what it is that they need to do. If you can't, as a vet, get an appointment in 30 days and you're stuck, then there should be some consequence. And the consequence would be you lose that veteran, and someone in a private provider can provide a better care at a lower cost. We should empower the veterans, not the system. And that's how America works at its best.
It's been an honor and a privilege. Thank you, Governor.
Yeah, one other thing, as it relates to vets, I'm proud of the fact that I have 12 Medal of Honor recipients supporting me, a large number of veterans that have advised me on this. This is a huge issue, and it relates to Washington that is run amok, that is out of control. I don't ascribe bad intentions. It's totally irrelevant what their intentions are. It's that they're not showing their respect for the people that provide the money for the government to exist. And that relationship needs to change. Government needs to be the servant, not the master of our lives. And that's why I'm running for president.
Thank you so much, and thank you for making this LIBRE Forum such a success. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Gracias.
A ti. Gracias a ti. Do we have time? What time is it? We do it for 10 minutes, 15?